Good morning. I'm speaking to you from the newly conquered dictatorship of Canada with a K, where we apparently tried to overthrow the government with bouncy castles and snowballs and such outrageous activity as waving the official country flag and singing the national anthem. So obviously we're foreign terrorists and combatants. When I was later teenager, I was in a rock and roll band, and I had long hair, and was not too interested in politicking. And in those days, we called the Illuminati the man. It's the fault of the man. Now we know who the man is, and there's about 150 of them. And they're about to trash planet Earth. Now that I'm older, in air quotes, I'm the person who has talk radio blasting in my apartment all day because I'm having, what do you say? And telling all my friends the sky is falling, and they're not taking my calls. And I don't blame them. There's been a progression of actually just in the rock and roll business. Lately, the last 20, 30 years, I tried to get into the concert business and was just about to do that when the U.S. changed the laws on how many radio stations could be owned, because that would enable the owner to bend the news in his direction. Well, they took that away with radio, TV, and 3 huge companies scooped in and bought all the radio stations, all the concert halls, and all the record producing companies. This is in my arena of music. So you couldn't be recorded unless you were with them. You couldn't play concerts in their halls unless you were with them. And you couldn't be advertised on the radio unless you were with them. And that ended the concert business for all the small players. The same things happened with media, with television, radio, newspaper, especially the big 6 television and cable news companies. They're owned by 3 people, probably. I'll just say 6 because there's 6, but I think it's 3 people. And the 2 tech giants, Facebook and YouTube, which were forced by the CIA, FBI to give the government duplicate copies of all the traffic. Which is used to spy on Americans and everyone else under the guise of national security, because we'll find the terrorists communicating with each other. There was a lot of backlash in Congress about that, but it was not stopped, and it's still going on. But leading up to that is the history of the world, where we had tribal leaders who would hit you on the head with a club and say you owe your allegiance to me. And then the biggest, meanest tribal leader would hit the other tribal leaders over the head with the club and say, you must call me king. And the kings got outrageous, so the smarter people pushed for representative government, elected people, and then we had elected governments, and the power of the king was either eliminated, split up, or they became a figurehead monarch to sign the papers just to get stuff done. So we had abusive governments, and then lawyers were invented to do an end run around parliamentary laws and abuses. And then a lot of criminals were getting away with stuff because they had lawyers. So lately we have the alternative news radio broadcaster and the alternative video podcast maker on the alternative video sites, which don't have the clout, power, and reach of Facebook and YouTube. But if you go on there, they'll take you up. So feeding that is this new technology, which is what I'm doing, which is a cell phone in a car, putting my thoughts online, which are available to the whole world. I learned something very interesting. About a month ago, I put out a newsletter, and the newsletter has over 2,000 people on it, and a lot of them are old or from my business, and they get bounce backs because they're no longer there. And then somebody went, "Well, you're sending spam," and I said, "No, it's my newsletter." And they said, "Well, it looks like spam, so you have to appeal." So it turned out the company that was detecting this was called Spam House, Haus, and they're located in Germany. And they are a Titanic size internet presence. And who's paying them? Why are they doing this? I mean, it's nice, but somebody's footing the bill for this. And on the way to them, I found one in America, a company that was so big their divisions couldn't all be represented on my screen at the same time. So when alternative sites get out of line, they, in air quotes, call one of these huge companies and say, deny them server space, or tell them not to do this, or you'll get rid of them. So outside of Facebook and YouTube, there are other companies offering services, but they're buying this from these huge megalithic worldwide entities that control communication worldwide. So I didn't know about that. You probably don't know about that. But we're already very far into the game of suppression of our liberties. I have a medical research company, and in January of 2019, I received a query because I am online as a medical research company about a new virus. And the questions were twofold. Do you know what this is? And number two, can you do anything about it? And it included the DNA printout. So I know about that. Doing or saying anything about that is no longer allowed. So I can speak with authority on what that was, because it was sent to me before the suppression started. On high-level channels, it wasn't from somebody in their basement. So I can't talk about that. I can say it was 30 years in development, and it's genius, genius, genius. Genius. a lot of the alternative sites are able to tell you what it is. I won't do that because I want to put this on YouTube. So we'll move on to part B of this, which is the weapons they're using in Ukraine are something that the Germans invented at the end of World War II, and they were using it on Stalingrad. And it was so bad, the Russians said, if you continue to use this, we're going to break all the rules of warfare, and you will not believe what will happen to you, because this is like inhuman and unholy. And the Russians stopped, and the Germans stopped using it. So how bad would it have been where the Russians are able to scare the Germans to saying, although we're in a shooting war, and using guns, bullets, knives, cannons, grenades, bombs, jets, 50 caliber machine guns, to say, if you don't stop that, things are going to get really bad for you. And they believed it. These are called air bombs. The World War II one was propane being released into the atmosphere, and then you set it off, and there's a tremendous burning explosion and a huge concussion down and out. And this can turn people's internal organs into jelly, burn their skin, collapse their lungs, set their lungs on fire. That's been outlawed by the people who do that. Now, this week, it turns out the Russians admitted they're using these things. They're not calling them air bombs, but they are a chemical in a container. The container explodes, and the gaseous or liquid chemical concoction spreads out, and then there's a small explosion to ignite it. And you get a burning bubble where the concussion is 500 pounds per square inch. It's 5,000 degrees, which is half the temperature of the sun. And if you're in the blast radius, you just get incinerated, or your internal insides will be liquefied, which is why these weapons are illegal. Now, the Russians are using them in portable banks of 25, and they fire them at a target, and it explodes anywhere near the target, and you get this quite effective blast. And it turns out that the Javelin anti-tank weapon is similar-ish. The Javelin will come over a tank, detect the metal, and fire straight down a similar weapon, which liquefies him in the tank. That's why they're so effective. They're not actually blowing the tank up. So that just came out yesterday. I thought the Javelin was hitting the tank between the gun and the base, but not so. And the British one is probably the same. So there we have illegal weapons being used by both sides. Thirdly, it looks like they're trying to portray Russia as being inept. They're using 1980s tanks and young, ill-prepared, untrained soldiers, and they're portraying that they cannot penetrate Ukraine. People who know about war in Russia say that Russia could stomp out Ukraine in about 2 hours if they wanted to. So I personally think this is a trap to get the U.S. involved and then to humiliate the U.S. by stomping them out in 2 hours. And Russia always has the nuclear option. They could nuke one city anywhere in Europe or America, and everyone would go, oh, don't do that. So it's going to become a done deal of some kind. I don't know what they're up to. Where I am, I'm down by the famous Fraser River, which runs hundreds of miles down the province and enters the sea. It's so calm you can see your face in it. There's a light spring rain to tease the flowers into blooming in a couple of months, and there's a gray overcast clouds to keep the whole thing not somber, but beautiful. I don't know what Canadians will do about Trudeau. He's with a party that basically was the ruling party here for 50 years, and things got so bad under his father that his father actually threatened to go to Quebec, become premier, and then take Quebec out of the Confederation. And all of the rail and the highway lines go through Quebec, so it effectively cut the Western Canada from far Eastern Canada. So we voted him in one more time. After that, there were several other parties attempted to clean up the mess, and no one was able to do a really great job. And the Liberals couldn't come up with somebody that you would let babysit your dog. So they let Trudeau Jr. had to grow up, and he had no political experience. He's a drama teacher. He teaches acting, and several of the countries these days have had or have actors playing the president, fronting a group of controllers, wiser heads. So I did a video called Justin Trudeau, Innocence of All Charges. I had to take it down before they, in air quotes, came for me, and several other videos. I'm now living in a country similar to what we would have said Russia is. If you say the wrong thing online, they come for you. And they jail you illegally, like the U.S. does. And while you're in jail, they think up more charges to charge you with. Moving right along, which I learned from Jen Psaki, is people behind the scenes have thought maybe Trudeau screwed up by doing what he did. He's certainly being slammed in the international community for it. So in case he can't be elected, they have brought a Trudeau-era politician called Jean Charest out of mothballs in Quebec, and he's going to run. And the reason for that, in my experience, and I can't prove this anymore because the proof was taken out of my computer, Twice I've had it been raided and people sucked all my research data out of the back of my computer. That the Canada is a U.S. corporation, and the articles of corporation are always held by the Premier of Quebec. Who knows? Check that out. It might still be online somewhere. It was all there available at one time. So a lot of this stuff is if it looks like a duck and smells like a duck and walks like a duck, the world will say, "Oh no, it's not. You're just being a conspiracy theorist." But I haven't heard of Jean Charest for 50 years. And suddenly he's so concerned about why, or however you say that, the Chinese spy technology. And he might run for prime minister. Based on, you need a name. A name is better than a no name. For example, Joe Biden was vice president, so the name was picked to be the front runner. Not necessarily picking the best, smartest person. To be the leader of a political party, you have to be smarter than, tougher than, and more insistent than all the other members of the party, because everybody wants to be king. And you have to convince, or make deals with everyone else to say, we think he or she should be the leader. It's not nice. It's like at the Vatican when they pick a new pope. It's not nice. Everyone wants to be pope, and they faction and faction and faction, and finally the right colored smoke comes out. At least the Vatican admits they use smoke and mirrors. So we're all here. I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. When I was a boy, everything was right. The Russians came out and took over all the satellite countries around them with tanks, as they're doing now, and held them for a good many years. And it's not out of the realm of possibility that they will do that again, because they've done it before. They're doing it now. They show up at the border with tanks and start blowing up buildings. Under the same guise as they did last time, we just want to repatriate the Russian people who are unfortunately living in other jurisdictions, or what the Germans said, we're just trying to repatriate the German-speaking peoples in Poland and France and some of the Nordic countries. And that was really about getting the Russian oil and then making a hard right and going down to the Middle East and getting the Middle East oil. That was the plan. That's what Rommel was doing in Northern Africa. They came all the way around. Never went to Moscow, because capturing Moscow wasn't the goal. Capturing the oil fields was the goal. So behind the war, don't mention the war, is always oil. The biggest oil well in the Middle East is between Israel and Palestine. It's actually on the Palestinian side of the border that the British carved down there and said, we're going to separate you guys. because you're just not getting along. The line comes down, and where the oil well is, it goes bloop over into Palestine and carries on. So that oil would be belonging to the Palestinians, but the Jewish people say, well, they'll just sell it and use the money to do more terrorism. So that sits there. The Russians are probably coveting that oil well, and the Israelis have discovered the oil shale under the sea off Palestine. 700 billion barrels of oil, I think, and they're rushing to develop that. So it's all about oil for cars and home heating oil or home heating natural gas. It's not just the cars. And we collectively are waiting for the strong man, in air quotes, to come in and stop all this craziness. And where is he or she? There's this vague hope off in the distance of Donald Trump will come back and make everything all right. There's the hope on the other side that the fake Messiah will come back and say, you've got a problem, you're reacting badly to this, here's the solution, which is go my way, and I will straighten all this out for you. You just have to give up your sovereignty, your freedom and your rights while we straighten this whole thing out and make a nice global community that will operate efficiently under AI, and then we can stop destroying the world and live peaceful but smaller lives. A significant percentage of the people involved in managing the troubles, as the Irish used to call them, are eugenicists. And eugenicists are people who believe in culling the population because people are destroying the earth. So they believe in killing the old people, killing the sick people, killing the genetically damaged people, medically damaged people, criminals, people who oppose them, and that pretty well covers everyone. It just leaves you. And you need to be controlled. You need the mark of the beast to control your food and your money and your housing. I'm looking out my window. There's a beautiful little bird here with spring markings, meaning he wants to have babies. And it's raining. It's cold. It's probably 40 degrees centigrade. He's happy. He's digging away, looking for seeds. And there's a family of ducks over there, mom and dad, digging in the grass, looking for worms. So the animals don't have political problems. They just need food. They're warm enough on their own. We are not. The Buddha said that you should plant food on every little corner of exposed ground. Even if it's only 3 by 3 feet, you should plant something, food. Because the cause of all wars is famine. And if you've been following the worldwide debacle with the food chain, it's going to hit. Mostly from the fall on this year, which is 2022, the fertilizer's been shorted, the seeds have been shorted, the weather's been bad, farmers are being paid not to grow crops. Gasoline prices are preventing crops from being taken to market. The meat plants have been closed for at least a year, maybe 2 years, so the farmers couldn't afford to feed the cattle with grain that they couldn't buy because it was wiped out by severe weather last year. So they slaughtered the cattle and were unable even to take them to the meatpacking plants because they're closed, because they're owned by China. So the cattle were slaughtered and just left to rot. And they won't have cattle children or pig children or chickens. Where I am in Canada, I'm in Vancouver, we have a valley up here about 100 miles long, and that's where all the milk cattle are. The beef cattle, the pigs, the chickens for eggs, and the chickens for slaughter, and the cornfields. They were all wiped out by a flood last fall. The fields were destroyed and the animals were all drowned. So that's going to hit hard after this summer when the crop is small. And insurance would not pay for the farmers because it was an act of God. We had an early rain which melted all the snow on the mountains, which usually comes down a couple of months from now, and all the rain and the melted snow came down at once. Took out 5 highways, all of that farmland, and almost took out the natural gas pipeline, which would have left about 1.5 million people here with no natural gas for heating or cooking, no way to get out of the city, no way to truck anything into the city. There's one highway left that they had to ration. Well, this is a port. It's the largest port on, and the only port actually on the western coast of Canada. Things can be brought in by ship, but everything by ship comes from China, and China's not shipping. Everything's right on the brink of the perfect storm. Well, that's it. If you're not prepared for at least 3 weeks of empty grocery stores, probably no natural gas, possibly no electricity, no internet, you better get busy. Because without some preparation, you're probably going to wind up with one flashlight with batteries that have power and 5 days worth of food in your fridge, a few cans, and not enough blankets or sleeping bags.